The race to nominate a Republican who will go head-to-head with Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow is coming down to the wire. One candidate calls himself the rebel with a cause. We'll talk with Clark Durant about the race and what sets him apart on West Michigan Week. And thank you for joining us on West Michigan Week. On the panel, we've got our standby, Dave Murray from MLive Media Group. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And Clark Durant, you're running for GOP nominee for U.S. Senate. How are you, sir?
I'm glad to be here, too. It's always nice to come over to the west side of the state, particularly after some wonderful successes along the way recently.
Well, we like to think it's the better side of the state, so thanks for joining us.
It's an important part of the state.
And there are, I would imagine, a lot of folks out there, perhaps undecided, maybe they don't know a whole lot about you. You have quite a past, quite a resume. Give us the elevator snapshot.
Well, I was a 23-year-old vice president of Hillsdale College. I'm a founder of their flagship publication, Imprimis, which now goes to 2 million people around the world. I went to law school at Notre Dame, taught in the undergraduate school. I was asked by President Reagan to head up a very controversial agency, but he wanted someone who would challenge the status quo and the spending culture in Washington. I privatized a railroad. I ran a railroad, the Ann Arbor Railroad, under Elizabeth Dole. Then about 20 years ago, I started the Cornerstone Schools. I say I co-founded because no one ever does anything alone. And those schools have developed to be the finest schools in the city of Detroit, in a city that is struggling with its graduation rate. 95% of the Cornerstone students graduate from high school.
Last week we had Pete Hoekstra here, and just listening to you describe your background, both of you provide quite a vast amount of experience. Both of you are qualified to fill this seat. What separates you from, first of all, Pete Hoekstra? We'll move on to Debbie Stabenow in a little bit here, but just between you and Pete, where do you see the difference?
Well, interestingly enough, we're both good guys, but we are fundamentally different in a number of things. I look at the greatest challenge facing our country is that both Republicans and Democrats have put our country at risk because of this enormous, irresponsible debt and spending. And Pete Hoekstra, time and time again, voted to increase the debt ceiling. The last one took us over $11 trillion and all the spending that goes with it. It is the Republicans as well as the Democrats who have been irresponsible regarding this spending and debt. And Pete, like Debbie Stabenow, has done it time and time again. The second thing that separates Pete and me is that Pete cut a deal with the Teamsters. And so Michigan depends on opening markets for our products. But Pete Hoekstra voted with organized labor in order to shut down the opportunity for faster open markets in Colombia, Panama, South Korea, and China, because organized labor didn't want that. And I think the third major difference is that Pete Hoekstra voted for the Wall Street bailout. I mean, talk about, the president is criticizing Governor Romney for outsourcing. That bill outsourced the taxpayers' money all over the world, besides bailing out Wall Street bankers, who should have been held accountable by suffering the mistakes or the losses of their wrong choices. But Pete, not even Debbie Stabenow voted for that. I mean, so Pete has put himself to the left of Debbie Stabenow on something that has turned out to be an absolute mistake in terms of that vote. So I think the difference between Pete Hoekstra and Clark Durant is vast. But the second thing, I think the reason why the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce endorsed me, they did it on two criteria were important to them. One, who can beat Debbie Stabenow? We have to defeat her because her votes, like the president's, are costing our businesses and our families tons of money and all the rest of it. But who also then can be a leader in Washington? And it was the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce that said Clark Durant, and not Pete, would be that choice.
And we have the graphic here, the endorsement by the Chamber, and I just want to read what the president of the Chamber, Rick Baker, had to say. He said, "It is clear that Washington is at a crossroads, and this election will help determine if our future is better than our past. Clark is committed to policies that will create economic opportunities for all Michigan residents, and he will get the job done." So you have this, and also the free press.
Yeah,
correct?
I have to tell you, Patrick, I was pleasantly surprised because when Pete ran for governor, the Free Press endorsed Pete Hoekstra, but not this time for the United States Senate. And I was flattered by the reasons why they did it. First, because of my educational background, my commitment to the children of the city, creating great schools for them. But I'll tell you the other thing that I was complimented by also. They said that the voice of Jack Kemp in the Republican Party is missing, and Clark Durant will fill that voice not only in Michigan, but in the country. And it is my hope that we can have that voice of hope and opportunity and allowing people to keep more of what they earn and have more control over their own lives. So getting that Free Press endorsement was a big thing too.
But those endorsements so far have not translated into success in the polls. So far you seem to be trailing Representative Hoekstra by a fair margin. What are people not seeing that the chambers and the Free Press are seeing?
I think it's two things. That's a great question, David, and thank you for asking it. I think that we are doing this according to a plan. This is a marathon and not a sprint. Things have to happen in sequence. Polls look at yesterday. We're looking forward. We just started last week a very significant media buy, not on cable, but on broadcast TV. It was almost a $400,000 buy. We're about to do a larger buy over these next couple of weeks. If you enjoy the Olympics, tune in, baby. But the point is that polls are yesterday, and we've been just moving forward in a very methodical way. What the chamber saw, what the Free Press saw, is they saw me up close and personal. And they said, this is the kind of guy who not only can defeat Debbie Stabenow, but can go down to Washington. Washington's broken. It's not accountable. And Republicans and Democrats, and frankly, including Pete, have put our country in that position. And people are looking for a change.
We just had the graphic up there, and we'll show it again. This is the Talking Points memo poll tracker, the TPM poll tracker. This is a today poll. I know we were talking about there yesterday, but this is a clearinghouse of polls here, and they have Pete Hoekstra with 42%, Clark Durant 11%, and Gary Glenn with 4%. I think the viewers should know that Gary Glenn has now stepped aside, and he's throwing all of his support behind you. Both of you endorsed by the MI4CS, those are the Tea Partiers here in the state. Gary Glenn won the endorsement, but you were a very close second. So let's talk about some of these dynamics, and as you say, the hare doesn't always win the race. The tortoise, in this case, is you. So when you do look at these polls, and with Gary stepping aside, give us a sense of the momentum that you are seeing here.
Well, I'll tell you very specifically, in driving over today to be with both of you, my phone's ringing off the hook. I've gotten emails. I've gotten money. You know, we did a big event with the Beach Boys on the last day of the last quarter. We made it possible for more than 1,000 veterans to attend that concert for free, frankly. We brought a lot of people together in the grassroots, but also donors, potential donors. We had a great time. In fact, it was so good that the drummer of the Beach Boys, in the second half of the concert, was wearing my T-shirt, the Clark Durant Rebel with a Cause for U.S. Senate. It was all on the jumbotrons, but it was all, I say it because this is all about building momentum. It's about building in the grassroots. I would say of all the candidates, Gary Glenn was farthest along with the grassroots organization. And in a primary, when the voter turnout is low ID, remember what these polls are telling you. They're telling you name ID. They're not telling you likely voters. What you want to do is you want to be going into the grassroots and getting the people who will actually be voting. And that's when that really counts. And the more people see our ads, the Rebel with a Cause and the motorcycle, which we're getting a lot of good feedback on, people are saying, oh, I like that guy. I want to, I'm going to, and I'm seeing it in emails and phone calls. The fact that Fred Thompson, you know, of Law and Order fame and movies with Clint Eastwood and a United States Senator himself, is coming in next Tuesday for me. Steve Forbes, the publisher of Forbes magazine, he's now coming into Michigan. So people are seeing things that don't show up in polls. And the real poll is obviously the one on August 7th.
But boy, if it's a marathon, you're in mile 22, 23, I mean...
No, not really. No, we're not. No, and I'll tell you why not. That's the conventional wisdom of the media. But here's the reality. This is 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks roughly. That's a lot of time. That truly is a lot of time. Now is when we started our media on July 10th. In politics, like anything else, you have to be disciplined. There are a lot of candidates on the landscape who spent too much too quickly and not at the right time. I have very good people who are helping me. My media team is the same media team that did the Swift Boats Veterans for Truth against John Kerry. They brought down a presidential candidate by telling the truth about John Kerry's record. My pollster, Tony Fabrizio, has done presidential races. We have a very good team. But most importantly, we have a message that Washington politicians, career politicians like Pete and Debbie, have not fixed the problem, and we need somebody from the outside.
How much of an outsider are you, though? You've been appointed by President Reagan. You've worked in Washington. You worked with Jack Kemp. Exactly.
Here's the answer to your question. None of those were my job. Pete Hoekstra and Debbie Stabenow, they're on the payroll, and they've not delivered, and they should be fired. My role, when President Reagan asked me to serve, I was a young man with a young family and a young lawyer. I got a per diem to show up at some of these meetings and represent our Constitution and try to also help poor people have access to justice. It wasn't my job. It was a calling. When Elizabeth Dole asked me to take over the Ann Arbor Railroad as the trustee, I was the trustee in reorganization in order to try to fix a railroad. When I served for Jack Kemp as one of his national co-chairs, that was not a job. Pete Hoekstra and Debbie Stabenow have taken the taxpayers' money as a salary and benefits and pensions, and they're not balancing the budget. They've made the debt worse, and they've made the spending worse. I mean, Pete went along with Debbie in all these earmarks. Pete even voted for one of the largest unfunded entitlements in recent history, Medicare Part D. And by some analysis, that could end up being more expensive than Obamacare. So Pete's got, his hands aren't clean. And he's lived in politics. He's now working for a law firm that's a very prominent lobbying firm. That's a career politician. I've done it as a service.
You talk about health care. Where do you see things heading here? The U.S. Supreme Court ruled the mandate a tax. I'm not quite sure how that tax is going to be collected at this time, but details, I guess. But I'm going to guess you're a repealer of this. But what is the solution? How do we fix the overall problem? Because both sides will say, we got a problem here.
Patrick, this is a great question, and there really needs to be more of a discussion, and I'm very glad you've asked this. First of all,
you have 30 seconds.
Oh my gosh! Well, here's the short answer.
Yeah.
Here's the short answer. You don't, with something as important as healthcare, you don't do anything that will violate the relationship between a patient and a doctor. You don't do things from the top down and command, control, mandates. We're going to get rationing, limitations, and higher costs. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has already said these estimates are going to be higher than anybody thought. What you need is what works in everything. Why is Meijer's such a great store? It offers choice, variety, and it meets the needs of the customer. The same should be true with healthcare. We need choice, variety, pricing. When's the last time you saw an ad for an insurance, for health insurance? You see it for cars, you see it for other things, but not for health. When's the last time you walked into your doctor's office and saw a price list? Because there's no discipline, because it's all third parties, big insurance companies, big hospitals, and big government. That will not meet the needs of individual patients and their doctors.
It seems like there is an issue here, though. I mean, we talk about the patient and the doctor relationship, but that pendulum swung a few decades ago where you've got this third party, the insurer involved, really calling more of the shots. And there is some blame placed on the patient, too, who doesn't fully understand, as you say, the pricing.
Exactly.
The pricing. You take advantage of something that you have no idea how much it costs.
Patrick, I think you're absolutely spot on. And in fact, look at this, where we penalize people and reward companies. Companies get special tax treatment for health care benefits, right, that they imply their employees. But ordinary people, if Dave goes out and is looking something, and MLive may not have the health care plan that he wants, He doesn't have the ability to have the same tax treatment if he goes and finds a competitive plan. He should have the same thing that companies have. And if insurance companies can sell insurance policies across state lines and bring down the costs and not have to provide things that the politicians want, but really what patients want, we'll get more types of insurance, we'll get lower costs. And tell me, we all buy things across state lines, but these politicians have made it impossible for us to buy insurance across state lines. So we've got to open this up. We know how to do this. We're Americans. We're Americans. We know how to fix these things. We trust freedom. We trust people to have more control over their own lives. If we do that, then people will have better health care, more health care for when their needs are there. They'll have insurance that meets their needs, and they won't be mandated to go buy something. How'd you like to be mandated to go into Myers and fill up your cart with things that you didn't ask for? You'd rebel against that like a nanosecond. We have to repeal Obamacare. And there's another reason besides the practical one, very quickly. This experiment in self-government, if you go back and read the founders in Madison and Hamilton and Jefferson, it's all rooted in us working together and with the government at the federal level having limited powers. You shouldn't be passing, Congress should not be passing a bill that literally is not bipartisan. This is forcing it with a fist down the throat of the American people. From the context of our culture and our politics, that's not a good thing. We need to roll it back and start over again.
I have a mandate, and that is we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back in 1 minute. And we're back with more of West Michigan Week and candidate Clark Durant, who was founder of Cornerstone Schools. And of course, you were the main man here in the state running the school board.
Right. Well, it's been very interesting. We don't talk about education very much, but it is a fundamental issue really for this election and certainly for our country. We are not equipping kids to their best. We're not pulling out their gifts, their talents, because we have very regulated systems, if you will. Teaching and learning is almost too politicized. We have many good and wonderful teachers and administrators and superintendents in all forms of education, whether it's a traditional public school, whether it's a charter school, whether it's an independent school, a private school, whatever it may be. But if we're going to fundamentally change and better equip our kids, we've got to get to a point of more choice, more variety, more individualized learning. And we shouldn't be, think about it. All of schooling is essentially age discrimination. If you're this age, you're in this class. We should be focusing on competency. We should be looking to our kids getting prepared to do this, and once they are, we saw the story of, I think, the young man down in Holland who had his hot dog stand. He's a 13-year-old kid, and the Holland, had an ordinance to that he couldn't compete with the other stores. Here's a young man trying to start a little business. And we should be encouraging that, not slapping the kid down. Because kids need to be out into the world. Grand Rapids has that fabulous art project that is just, look at what that has done by opening up the human spirit and all this creativity. And yet we lock our kids down grade by grade by grade. We don't move them along by competency, we move them along by their ages. That won't get us to where we need to be if America is going to be the leader in the world.
The federal government's role has increased dramatically, and this week we saw Michigan get a waiver from the U.S. Education Department to get out from under No Child Left Behind requirements. When we spoke to Representative Hoekstra, he said no child has ruined education in America. What do you see as the federal government's role in local schools?
Well, I think the first benchmark is the Constitution. And the Constitution, nowhere that I've been able to find is even the word education in there. And I don't, when you have 50 departments of education across the country, we don't need one more. The Department of Education came in the late 70s. The last time I checked, America was doing pretty well prior to the late 70s in its creativity and the things that it made, developed, sold, its literature, its music. And some could argue, in fact, that some of our education has in fact gone down since the federal government has tried to have a larger role. I don't see it in the Constitution. If I'm the United States Senator, I would vote to close the Department of Education. I think education is a local matter with parents having, as a child's first teacher, but also having the choice as to where they want their kids to go to school, and let there be options. We have options for everything else. All three of us got to this studio having eaten a different meal this morning, having gotten here in a different manner. We're going to go to sleep tonight in a different house, but we're all going to be getting up the next morning and moving on with the things of our life. Schooling should not be regulated by the federal government.
So they would have no role whatsoever? As the country gets
David,
smaller
it's
and smaller?
shocking,
It
isn't
is
it?
shocking.
No role. But let me tell you.
How am I
where
gonna race to the top?
No, but well, here's how. Everything is counterintuitive.
Sure.
You think that Steve Jobs, he and Wozniak just, developed that Apple computer in a garage, okay? They didn't have to have some edict. When President Obama says you didn't, start your business, or you weren't successful in your business, however he phrased that, it's all a belief that this stuff happens out of Washington. It doesn't happen out of Washington. It happens organically back in our communities. We can get great schools. Grand Rapids is a good example of people who come together for others. Here's where, as a United States Senator, though, I would have a role, would want to have a role in education. Given my experience as president of the State Board of Education in Michigan, given my experience as a co-founder of a very successful little set of schools in Detroit, I care deeply about our kids being well educated. I would be willing to talk about it. Don't underestimate the value of the bully pulpit of a United States Senator. And I care deeply that our kids from Michigan not only get well educated in Michigan, but stay in Michigan. Grand Valley, for example, because I've looked at the data, has a very good track record of equipping kids, and these kids find jobs in Michigan. Hooray for Grand Valley, because I think that's a very important statistic. But Grand Valley's not successful because the federal government is in or out of education. Grand Valley is successful because it has good people at the faculty level, it has good people in the administration, on its board, but also in the broader community. That's what is the framework of creating great schools.
What do you do when a local district is not doing its job? You're in Detroit, of course, as a charter operator. Arnie Duncan told me last year Detroit schools were ground zero in American education, the worst district in the country.
Arnie, get out of our backyard. Number two, look at the way this crisis in Detroit is beginning to bring about new changes and new schools. The state and the community and the community, and the businesses and all the rest of that are working to solve this problem. I, for example, sit on the board of the Excellent Schools Detroit board of the Skillman Foundation. Last Monday, I don't normally talk about this, but last Monday the Detroit Public Schools asked me to meet with 9 of their high school principals who are trying to operate different kinds of high schools. And what did Cornerstone have to teach them? Now, Cornerstone is an independent school rooted in trying to recognizing to have a broad and beloved community of friends that help make an excellent education possible, preparing kids for life, following the teachings of Jesus, frankly, to love God and to love others. And what does that mean? Can you imagine? Here you have the Detroit Public Schools saying to Cornerstone, come and help us be better. Well, of course we will. Of course we will, as anybody would. But the federal government is too far away. They can come in and drop in and get their pictures taken, but then they go home again. These are things that we have to solve as a people. And hey, come on, David, we're Americans. We can solve these things, and we should solve them.
All right, Tortoise. You make up ground on Hoekstra, okay? We're going to look at a Rasmussen poll, and that is, if you're the guy, right, you get nominated, there still is this 11-point gap between Stabenow and Durant. You could make it Stabenow and Hoekstra.
We're virtually even against
right,
Stabenow.
on a one-on-one. What do you do? How do you make up that ground? Is Jack Kemp going to throw the Hail Mary on this one? What do you got?
Here's the way to do that. Pete has gotten about as far as he's going to be able to do, I think, against Debbie. The reason, here's where I think I can make up the lost ground, and it's in two areas. First, Debbie's not gone above, unless Pete has done the China ad and all that sort of stuff, Debbie never went above 50%. She's vulnerable. Number two, I can penetrate her territory, and I'll get votes in Democratic territory. There's no I've had Democrats, Independents, and Republicans raise money, circulate petitions for me, and host fundraisers. There's no Republican who's been able to do that. I'm Debbie Stabenow's worst nightmare.
And you got to get those farmers to vote for you,
Hey,
too.
well, we will, and that's another conversation for the next time I come back.
All right, and we'll invite you back if you're the nominee. On the panel, Dave Murray, MLive Media Group.
Thank you.
And we've got GOP hopeful Clark Durant.
Thank you,
so
Patrick,
much for
very
joining
My
us.
pleasure. Enjoyed it immensely.
And thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next week on West Michigan Week.